Testing. Testing 1, 2. Is it on? Well, are you sure? Because there's no indicator signal that... Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. Hello to the land of the living. If you can hear this, then know you're not dreaming. Your radio really is picking up a broadcast. Before we even start, I just have to say that no, you're not rescued. This isn't a government signal. There is no zombie-free paradise. And the worst, sadly, probably isn't over. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is that you're not alone. The world might have gone to hell, but small pockets of humanity have survived, and we're still out here. Can you adjust the gain? I'm getting some pretty bad feedback. There you go. Okay, perfect. The purpose of this broadcast, which we've set to repeat every 6 hours, is to give hope to whoever might hear it, and to let you know that you are absolutely not alone. No matter how bad it's gotten, or no matter how many horrors you've seen, you are not alone. So don't give up. Not for a minute, not for a second. The only thing that separates us from them is hope. All right, for those of you hearing this for the first time, my name is David Kennedy, and like you, I am a survivor. I've spent the last year roaming the country trying to figure out exactly what happened to us and why. During that time, I've met hundreds of people with their own stories, personal struggles, and losses. But there are some victories. A few months into my trek, I decided to start interviewing them so that their voices would never truly be lost in the sea of endless moans that now deafen our world. Maybe their tales will inspire you. Maybe they'll make you laugh or cry. Or maybe they'll just remind you that there are other people still out there. People like you. So why am I doing this? What do I get out of it? Well, that's a fair question, and it's one that I intend to answer. Because this is my story as much as it is anyone else's. How could I ask the world to bare its soul to me if I refuse to do the same? As I stated before, my name is David Kennedy, and I am 24 years old. No, David Kennedy isn't some cool way to introduce myself like some sort of suave super spy. My first and middle name are both David. My father was David, and my grandfather was David, and to be fair, my mother named me after both men, never telling either which David came first. Growing up with the two first names was brutal as a kid. Man. It earned me both merciless teasing and the nickname Double D. I initially tried to fight it, but as childhood nicknames do, it stuck. So I eventually just embraced it. Oddly enough, it was probably that name that saved my life. It was because of it that I always kept fit and in shape. You don't want to be a fat kid with a pair of sweaty man boobs and the nickname Double D, you know. So when the outbreak went full swing, I was in good enough shape to survive it. It's like that prophetic movie of old stated, rule number 1, cardio. Before the world officially ended, I was a college student, majoring, as you might have guessed by now, in journalism. Who knows, if the world ever recovers from this, maybe I'll be remembered as the last real reporter. And that's a pretty big if. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's pretty bad out there. So now you know who I am and that you're not alone. God, I can't stress that enough. You're probably wondering what the hell actually happened. Well, sadly, there is no real official explanation, at least not one that I've ever heard from a credible source. The only thing that we could do was sort of assemble a timeline from old media clips and recordings that were made right before everything went to shit. And I can tell you that, look, I can't say that what we put together is right or even all that accurate, and I can't promise. Let me just tell you that it isn't biased, and that we've made it with the intent to shine as much light into the darkness as humanly possible. I think the world deserves to hear the truth, and that's what we intend to bring you. I think it's safe by now to admit that we are dealing with zombies. Not walkers, roamers, biters, shufflers, or any of the other names that the old television shows would just throw out to avoid saying the Z word, but actual, I can't believe they're real zombies. Being a college student, I find myself naturally gravitating towards conspiracy theories and shadowy plots, so we can't honestly ever say when all of this actually started. Government and media cover-ups have happened in the past, and I have absolutely no doubt that they happened during the initial outbreak. Still, the first real segment that we could find came from a local news channel out of Dallas, Texas, and we think this may be the earliest clue to what actually went down. This is what we have.
With the Dow Jones Industrial Average shattering industry records and closing well over 15,000 today, that number comes from a complicated formula based on 30 stocks that are part of a Dow Jones average. The higher the number, the higher the value of those stocks, and there's no need to speculate which stocks in particular help boost those numbers today. Am I right, Cindy?
Indeed you are, Ron. Kurama Pharmaceuticals, the newly emerging biotech company with roots in Italy, is turning heads and raising brows as it swiftly becomes an international leader of both medical and therapeutic goods right here in the United States. Their spokesperson, Jana Kirkpatrick, has been credited with much of the company's climb, with her claim that they are only a few trails away from actually curing everything from swine flu to the common cold.
Those are some pretty bold statements.
True, but as Kurama Pharmaceuticals has filed over 87 patents in the last year alone, the experts think that they might really be onto something.
87 patents? Is that a lot?
Well, it sure seems like a lot to me, but whatever they're doing, they must be doing it right because their stock has gone up in value over 500% since hitting the markets a little over 2 years ago.
Makes me wish that I had gotten in on that. But I will tell you what I did not miss out on last night's game. Did you see it?
I didn't. Believe it or not, I was stuck smack dab in the middle of that massive traffic jam that Bob mentioned earlier. I sat on the Spencer Street Bridge for over 4 hours.
4 hours? Yikes. Well, you missed one heck of a game. Our very own Razors went head-to-head against the Coyotes last night, and it was nothing short of brutal. We'll have a full recap of the game and the heated words that were exchanged between the two coaches that may have them both in hot water. Right after these words from our sponsors.
All right, it might not sound like much, but that news report gives us the name Kurama Pharmaceuticals. If you'd never heard of them, they were all over the news right before, well, the news stopped. They were working on some miracle cure that was going to revolutionize the world. The traffic jam she mentioned was later attributed to some homeless drug addict high on bath salts, but is now arguably the first reported surfacing of a zombie attack. Oh, and fun fact, I lost $50 on that game. And to tell you the truth, we almost missed it. There's still a bit of argument with some of the other survivors on whether or not that we can include this as evidence, and there are no official tie-ins to the outbreak or Kurama Pharmaceuticals, but the coincidence of the discovery coming from Italy and the mention of the disease becoming the cure was pretty hard to ignore. Again, while we can't prove anything by playing this, we felt that it was potentially too important to leave out.
Welcome back to The Piercing Truth with me, Oliver Pierce. If you're just tuning in, we're here with a very special guest, Dr. Robert Carver, discussing his new and some would say even controversial book, An Island of Death, The History of Poveglia. It's currently enjoying a top spot on the New York Times top 10 list, and I suspect, given its contents, it may be there for a while. Dr. Carver, once again, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here, Oliver.
Now, Dr. Carver, as we were discussing before the break, your archaeological expedition in Italy came to an abrupt end when the Italian government found that, shall we say, there were some irregularities in your paperwork.
That's the reason they gave, yes, but I assure you my papers were in perfect order. You see...
But, no. They shut you down and they confiscated your work, citing, let me see here, failure to report human remains and unapproved excavation methods.
No, that's not true. We had no intention of...
Then what exactly was your purpose on the island, Doctor? If it wasn't to give... Well, if it wasn't grave robbing, as some have accused, I mean, they revoked your dig licenses. Surely that has some serious implications.
My purpose is... How do I put this? Poveglia is a modern-age Eden, the likes we've never seen.
I don't recall insane asylums or infectious disease in the Garden of Eden, Doctor, at least not in the version of the Bible that I've read.
While it is true that the island has been used as a dumping ground of disease and pestilence since the early Napoleonic Wars, what has grown from this rotted fruit is nothing short of miraculous.
How so?
Imagine, if you will, the worst strain of tuberculosis or even the most treatment-resistant form of influenza. While modern medicine has grown by leaps and bounds and these things are no longer the threat that they once were, at one time they were a very real problem. And a nightmare to deal with. Whenever an illness, disease, or even plague mutated beyond what could be considered normal, those who were inflicted were sent to Poveglia for study.
But they weren't being studied, were they? In your book, what is it that you call it? Ignorant containment.
These people were sent to hospitals and asylums on the island, not for treatment or medical experimentation, but for something far worse, simple housing. The healthy world wanted nothing to do with them, and the medical world saw them as too dangerous to not be contained and accounted for. So, under Napoleon, what had started as a rudimentary confinement station became a permanent fixture. The ill were gathered and contained in Poveglia out of fear, but it is because of that fear that nature itself began to change.
I don't understand.
When you have that many strains of disease, each mutating or changing in ways that had never before been seen, confined in such tight, uncontrolled quarters, they begin to breed something entirely new altogether. Medical miracles that could not be explained, reversal of disease, sickness, and in some cases, even death. The disease had become the cure.
Yet you claim that there is indeed experimentation upon the afflicted.
Not under Napoleon, quite the contrary. He wanted nothing to do with Poveglia. When the emperor learned of the changes that were being reported upon the island, he ordered it destroyed, but by then the sickness and mutations alike had escaped the confines of the Church of San Vitale and had spread to undocumented parts of the island.
So the experimentation upon the sick came from...
the German military, mostly during the occupation of World War II.
It always comes back to the Nazis.
During the Italian surrender to the Germans in World War II, the Germans scouted Poveglia for what were initially militaristic purposes. They were hopeful that the Venetian forts built in the early 1600s could be upgraded and utilized in a modern defensive manner. What they found instead was an island that had a much larger, much different population than previously reported. Those who had survived, along with their now exponentially mutated illnesses, possessed immunities unlike the world had ever seen. The Annenerbe, or Special Projects Division of the SS, were very excited at this discovery.
Yes, but you have no evidence or findings to back up these claims.
But I do. I did. My research documented countless cases.
Research that you claim the Italian...
My paperwork was never in question before I submitted to the first of my findings. I don't know from where these allegations against my expedition sprang, but everything was in order. I had in my possession actual letters from Napoleon himself condemning the island, using the condemnation of San Vitale as an excuse to destroy what they had found there.
The majority of the scientific community, sir, regards you as a crackpot.
Crackpot? I have the support of many of my peers. The community is behind me. They are simply skeptical of my findings, as they should be.
As you cannot provide, beyond verbal anecdote, any evidence of your claim.
But why would they shut down my studies? They had the evidence. They saw what I was on the verge of bringing to the world.
Dr. Carver, thank you once again for your time. I hope your book, the grimly titled An Island of Death, The History of Poveglia, continues to do well. We found it to be very gripping, although admittedly hard to swallow. After the break, we'll be right back with the cast of British Nannies. Too hot for your top. Stay tuned.
Without the internet or much technology to fall back on, our research into Dr. Carver's claims hit a dead end almost immediately. The only thing that we could find was an old encyclopedia entry on the island of Poveglia that confirmed its use as a plague station, and the orders from Napoleon to destroy the Church of San Vital. Still, Dr. Carver's insistence of not just a cure being found on the island, but one born from disease, well, it just hits too close to home for us to ignore. Take it for what you will, but I personally wouldn't discount it. Okay, about 3 weeks after the interview with Dr. Carver aired, ANN began coverage on a Senate hearing in which a senator from New York is accused of taking money from Kurama Pharmaceuticals and refused to explain as to why he was spending so much time in Italy. This is what really cements our suspicion of Kurama's involvement in the outbreak. We cut out most of the official preludes and went directly for the meat of the conversation, which saves you about 4 hours of political droning. Note the mention of DARPA and how the United States government seems to, well, have ties directly to both Italy and Kurama.
You're watching ANN, the American News Network, America's most trusted source for news.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Our top headline of the day continues to focus on the numerous and often bizarre allegations of misconduct that have been brought against Senator Robert Davison of New York. As you may recall, Senator Davison's activities were brought into question during the trials of Joseph Edwards, a former Defense Research employee, now serving a 25-year sentence for his part in what some are now calling the Project Phoebe scandal. We now go live to the Senate hearing still underway.
The committee will be in order. The committee now resumes its hearings on the investigation into the allegations of conflict of occupational interest, obstruction of Congress, and hampering of an investigation by the United States Senate Committee brought against Senator Robert Davison of New York. Senator Davison, am I correct in stating that you have a copy of the list of allegations brought before this committee in front of you now?
That is correct, Madam Chairman.
Senator, if you could, please explain to this committee exactly what your involvement is with the article labeled Project Phoebe.
At this time, I would like to remind the chairwoman, the Madam Chairperson, that I sit on the Senate Committee for Intelligence in an official capacity and that I am not authorized to release sensitive information to the public at this time.
The chair acknowledges your position, Senator Davison, but it still requests that you answer to the best of your ability or to the degree in which you are allowed to speak on the subject. Now, are you stating for the record that you are unable to comment in any fashion on the article entitled Project Phoebe?
That is correct, Madam Chairman.
Senator, how many times have you been to Italy in the last 3 years?
That information is currently classified under Executive Order 13526, and I am not authorized to release it to the public at this time.
Is it true that you've been to Italy over 24 times in the last 3 years, acting in both official and unofficial capacities as in accordance with your current job title?
Again, that information is currently classified under Executive Order 13526, and I am not authorized to release it to the public at this time.
This committee, if you will look at Article 6 on page 3 of the booklet provided, has no record of your official involvement in any activities or articles as sanctioned by the Senate that would require your presence in Italy. Yet we have copies of several reimbursement requisition forms bearing your signature that prove that you were there on numerous occasions. Is that your signature, Senator?
Madam Chairman, that information is also currently classified under Executive Order 13526, and I am not authorized to release it
where
to
or
the
what
public
is
at this
Sturm
time.
and Drang?
I apologize, Madam Chairman, but that information is currently classified under Executive Order 13526, and I am not authorized to release
Senator
it to the public
Davison, your
at this time.
continued impediment of this hearing is duly noted, much to the disappointment of this committee. Perhaps a simpler question: what is your relationship with Kurama Pharmaceuticals?
Like many here, yourself included, Madam Chairman, I have invested in the company's stocks. I make no secret of this.
Indeed. Yet, unlike many here, you have been named as a member of their advisory board. Am I correct in stating this, Senator?
No, Madam Chairman, you are not correct. I have accepted no official titles or duties with Kurama Pharmaceuticals.
Are you saying that you do not sit on the advisory board for Kurama Pharmaceuticals?
I have accepted no official titles or duties within the company, Madam Chairman.
Senator, do you sit on the advisory board for Kurama Pharmaceuticals in any capacity, official or not?
That information is currently classified under Executive Order 13526, and I am not authorized
Senator
to release it to the
Davison,
public
when was the
at
last
this
time you were in Arlington, Virginia?
I have been present in Arlington several times in the last few years, a number of military memorials, and when I can, I like to take my family to the Bay.
And during these trips, how often did you be located there?
I'm sure once or twice, Madam Chairman.
And what was the nature of these visits?
I believe the agency in which the committee notes was a stop on tour.
DARPA is a secure facility, Senator Davison. Are you saying that you were simply visiting?
No, Madam Chairman, I'm saying that I cannot recall the reason for the visit as it was not noteworthy.
And during these non-noteworthy visits, did you ever come in contact with a Mr. Joseph Allen Edwards?
I do not recall.
So this committee is to understand that you have never had previous contact with Mr. Edwards?
I do not recall, Madam Chairman. As I was never introduced to Mr. Edwards by name, I may have inadvertently seen him without association if he were at the facility.
So you never received anything from Mr. Edwards?
That is correct.
And you never used your station with the United States Senate to facilitate an exchange with Mr. Edwards on behalf of Kurama Pharmaceuticals?
This is correct.
Immediately following one of the several visits to the DARPA facility in which this committee has documented evidence of, you were flown from a private airport to an undisclosed location in Venice. What was the purpose of that trip?
That information is currently classified under Executive Order 13526.
Senator Davison, the committee respectfully insists that you answer the question.
Under Executive Order 13526, that information is listed as classified.
Senator, your reliance on this executive order is...
You have been watching the exclusive live coverage from the Senate hearings involving Senator Robert Davidson of New York. We will have more coverage of this story as it further develops. When we return, video games, they're not just for kids anymore. We'll have an exclusive inside look at what goes on behind the scenes at the Electronic Entertainment Expo, or E3 as it's known to those who attend. That and much more after this.
For those of you who don't remember, Joseph Edwards was a DARPA employee who dropped a ton of documentation to one of those online anti-government sites before he was taken into custody. He claims to have not only handed over important medical research to Senator Davidson, but that Kurama Pharmaceuticals was working closely with the United States government on a military project. Unfortunately, Mr. Edwards was whisked away, never to be seen again. Shortly after the world as we know it ended. Now, I've been trying to wrap my head around how much actual footage of the outbreak must have been lost from news crews or some random guy with a cell phone who never saw it coming. Could you imagine what YouTube would be like if we could still connect to it? I'm still hopeful I can find more, but I did manage to locate this interview from a TV station in Columbus. I couldn't figure out a way to get it off the playback machine, so I just recorded the audio. You would think that with all the soldiers and police officers that we had in this country, they would have been able to contain something like this.
Have any information they should contact their local Red Cross. And now we are going live to Don, who is downtown where Grace Mercy West Hospital has been evacuated. Don, what's happening down there?
Thanks, Mary. We're here behind a series of police barricades with a crowd of employees. We're still a little unclear at what spurned the evacuation, and the police I've spoken with are calling it a biological hazard, which could be anything, I suppose. Our best guess is a chemical spill at this point, but I'm actually here with Carrie Ryan, who was one of the many rushed outside with little explanation. Carrie, you work in the hospital, correct?
That's right. I'm the chief nursing officer in oncology.
And can we safely say today was not a normal day of work?
I think we can, Don.
Can you tell us what you saw? Surely something pretty bad must have happened if an evacuation was ordered.
You know, I'm not really sure. I had just started my shift, hadn't even had my coffee yet, and the alarms went off. The other nurses and I assumed it was system testing, but in this day and age, you have to take these things seriously. So we started following protocol and prioritizing patients for evacuation when security came running down the hall and told us to leave them. That was my first indication something was seriously wrong. They rushed us out with everyone else. No one has been allowed back in.
How long ago was that?
Probably an hour now.
Have you seen any of your patients come out yet?
No, but they might have been taken out through the freight elevator on the north end.
Carrie, what do you think happened in there?
I've been hearing weird rumors from some of the orderlies. Word is something happened in the morgue, but nothing ever happens there. I'm pretty sure someone worked too long of a shift and started seeing things. It happens with some of the physicians from time to time. This line of work is high stress, you know.
Has anything like this ever happened before?
Evacuations? Outside of a bomb threat every few years, it's pretty unusual. When there is a major emergency, they usually lock us inside the hospital, not out.
Well, Carrie, thank you for talking with us.
My pleasure. Don? Don, was that gunfire? Can you tell us what's happening?
Mike, are you getting that? No. Over there. Mary, some sort of military force seems to have arrived, and we are hearing sounds of what seem to be gunfire inside the hospital. They aren't wearing standard uniforms, so I can't identify which branch we are seeing. They appear to be in full
Unit 1.
gear.
Unit 1, I want these civvies back now. Give me a one-click permitted, or I want this AOR sealed. Cobbs, raise the top. Find out where my damn Apaches are. Where the fuck? Had you turn that camera off? I want it off now.
Hey, you can't just
cut the feed.